What can you learn from a sought-after performance coach, speaker, and author of 8 books? Well, the answer is a lot. In this 45-minute interview, I discuss so many great topics, important topics around leadership and growth with Joe Calloway. As I mentioned, Joe is an author and a speaker and a performance coach and has an incredible insight and perspective on things that matter the most to you as an agency leader. I don't think this will be the last time I'll have Joe on because we had so much great conversation that there's more we want to unpack. But enjoy this next 45 minutes. If you take notes and really understand the things that Joe and I talk about, it will change your perspective and how you move your agency forward. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Agent Leader Podcast. This is the podcast for insurance agency leaders to learn, to grow, to develop, and ultimately aspire to become their best version possible. My name is Brent Kelly. I am your host. Delighted to be with you and super delighted to have a very special guest. Someone who I've known for way longer than he's known me. That's because he's an author, he's a speaker, he's a high-level performance coach. He's got a who's list of clients he's worked with. And in fact, as I started my journey with the Sitkins Group about 8 years ago, one of his books was extremely transformational in how we viewed things. And we might talk about that. I've got Joe Calloway, an amazing guest today. Joe, first and foremost, before I want to hear about your backstory and how you got here and all the things you've done, just hello and welcome into the Agent Leader Podcast.
I'm telling you, I'm so happy to be here. I wouldn't be anywhere else. Thank you for having me.
Oh, 100%. And I just want to tell the audience again, you know, Joe's experience and background and the companies he's worked with, and obviously the books that he's written, they are so impactful for leaders. And it really is a privilege and honor to have Joe on today. Joe, if you want
Thanks.
to kick things off, share
Yeah.
a bit about your background, what you've done, all the stuff that makes Joe Joe.
Well, let me try and make a long story short. I grew up on a farm in a little town in Tennessee. I got a degree in political science, so I had no marketable skills. Uh, had had to go out and find a job. I ended up working at a small real estate firm, actually up in the Northwest in Washington State. And I was a real estate agent. I sold. Then I became the sales manager. Then I became the general manager. Now, this was a small firm. It was like a dozen, 14 agents.
Yeah.
But the way I got paid was based on the revenue of the company. So my job was to help them be more successful. That was totally 100% the way I made a living. And so I was a coach. I did all the training. We did a meeting 5 mornings a week, and it was my meeting, and it was all about how can I help them be better at what they do.
Yeah.
And I kind of got hooked on that. I enjoyed it. Well, word started to spread. Some of the agents would tell their spouses, and word got out. And so other businesses in Nashville, which is where I live, said, "Hey, could you come talk to our people, and we'll scrape a little money together." And it went on from there. Um,
Mm.
Ended up ultimately on the stage of the Staples Center in Los Angeles, speaking to 13,000 business owners and managers. And so that was a long ride to that point. And I'll tell you something interesting about that, Brent.
Mhm.
I would infinitely rather be in a room with 12 people working than a room with 12,000 people working.
Yeah.
I just, as I told you earlier, I like conversations way more than I like speeches.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, I wrote some books along the way. Now I pretty much just manage investments. I work with startups, and that's fun for me to work with a number of different businesses, particularly the young ones that are starting businesses. I love that energy they've got.
Yeah. Well, it's just again, we'll probably dive into more things, right? Based on some of the questions I want to ask you. But I start off, and we were talking before we officially started recording about conversation versus speeches, and I'm with you, Joe. So often, we'll talk about this with groups like this is going to be a conversation, not a presentation.
Yes.
And there is a difference. And by the way, audience, just so you know, warning, warning, from what I can gather, Joe and I are both very conversational and we might go off the rails. But as I said to Joe, and I think you agreed, if we find something that's really impactful and a great discussion, we'll just go there and stay there,
Yeah.
if need be. So, well, listen, you mentioned you wrote 8 books,
Yeah.
and we're not gonna, we certainly could unpack all the books, and there's different values and all kinds of things. But I really would like, and this is admittedly a bit of a selfish question, so I want to get into it. But one of your books, and I've got it with me here, is Keep It Simple.
Yeah.
And again, I was telling Joe before we started recording as well. We use this book even before some of our presentations and conversations that we have with people of let's not get things too complicated. And I will tell you, and I'd love to get your take on this. We find so often for insurance agency leaders, and this is true of leaders of any kind, is that it's really easy to take something and make it complicated. You
Yes.
add more layers to it. But where the best leaders that I see, and I want to get your vantage point, you've written a book on it, is that they do take things and make them to where I get it, I understand it, I can execute it. So, what have you seen from your experience, Joe? How do the best leaders keep it simple?
Yeah. You really hit on a key word, that it's easy to make it complicated. And it is.
Yeah.
Making stuff complicated is easy. Anybody can do that.
Mhm.
Taking what actually is kind of complex and making it simple, that's hard. But that's what great leaders do. Brent, I think a big part of a leader's responsibility is to simplify the complex.
Mm.
And, it's funny. You talked about the agencies, then it's true for everybody. It is true for everybody. I would be speaking to a group of from all kinds of companies, business leaders, and I'd say, all right, let me ask you something. Raise your hand if you ever find yourself saying this or thinking this. You know, we're making this way more complicated than it needs to be. And of course, every hand in the room went up. Mine too. I do the same thing. I'll stop myself times and go, wait a minute, this is silly. A couple of things. And then I want to give you an example of a company that I think had a really good approach,
Mhm.
and an approach that I've used with leaders on how to make things simple and much more effective and more powerful in a positive way. Um, you kind of hit on it when you said at the start of a conversation, you'll hold up the cover and say, okay, folks, let's keep this simple.
Mhm.
If we're intentional, if even just in our own mind, or maybe we've got our leadership group sitting with us, and we're wrestling with something that's on the face of it very complicated. If somebody goes, time out, time out, we're trying to deal with the complicated. Let's back up a little. How can we simplify this?
Mm.
And if you get everybody thinking on that track, I
Mm.
mean, it'll be amazing what people will come up with if you just point them in that direction. The example I want to give you, and it's a model that I've used with so many of my clients.
Mhm.
I just love it. I did a lot of work with a company. I bet most of the people watching have heard of it. Old Dominion. It's a shipping company. It's freight line.
Mhm.
Okay, that business logistically has more moving parts than you can count. I mean, there's so much information flying around and schedules and people. It's overwhelming. And if you ask Old Dominion, well, okay, you're in a really complicated business. Tell us about it. They'll say, no, it's not complicated. Listen to this. This is so strong. We have to do 3 things: pick it up when you said you would, deliver it when you said you would, deliver it intact and all there. And every job in this many thousands of employees company is geared to make those 3 things happen. Now, when I work with companies, I say, let's cascade that down. So you come up, and a lot of times I'll tell people, you've got 3 things that you have to do. And they'll say, what are they? I don't know.
Mhm.
You've got to figure that out. But when you figure that out, then you go down from the company three things to this department. All right, what is this department? What are their three things that will drive the major three things? And then to the leader, the manager of that department, what's her three things? And then every employee. And so, and of course, there's things that come up. There's a million little things.
Sure.
But if we stay focused on what's most important and let that drive our decisions and our choices in a simple way, it can be really powerful.
Mm. A lot of great takeaways there. And I want to comment on a couple, and if you got additional feedback, but I love what you said. Part of that, Joe, was about what I heard was you asking the team of how can we simplify this? And again, however that's structured, I guess it would probably vary, but just thinking about that, if you ask your team, how do we simplify this to get that approach of everyone's kind of thinking on the same page?
Yep,
And listen, they're the ones that are involved in all the day-to-day stuff anyway, and they
exactly.
don't want things to be complicated. So to me, that is just such a simple but powerful.
And I'm going to mention him again in a few minutes, I think, if we get on this subject. But in becoming a category one of the companies I reference is Tractor Supply Company.
Right?
And at the time, the president and CEO was Joe Scarlett, who's become since a very close friend of mine. But Joe used to go out to the stores, to the warehouses,
Mhm.
and he would say, he'd go in the warehouse and they'd all gather around. He'd say, "Hey, I'm Joe Scarlett. I'm the president of the company. I'm overhead. Here's what I need you to tell me. How are we making your job hard? What are we doing from corporate that's getting in your way?" He'd say, "Tell me." And they'd tell him because he was the kind of guy that you could tell he
Yeah.
really wants to know. And they'd say stuff like, "Wait a minute, let me go get that stupid form, this." And he'd say, "That is stupid."
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
just if you've got your antenna out
Mhm.
for how to simplify everywhere you can, strong stuff.
Yeah, boy, it's just again, it's one of those things that can just get away from you. And I do want to reference some insurance stuff, but I think you'll get it here just for the leaders. I always joke, and this is true for anybody, but for all of our salespeople, the producers in the game, and I heard this from a sales trainer years ago. He goes, "You got to stop techno barfing on people," and that was a term he used. And every industry has their own jargon, right? Their own acronyms, whatever. The insurance industry's got a bazillion of them, and it's like we talk in this language that we think is pretty cool. But the people we're trying to communicate with have no idea what they're saying. And they sometimes try to be nice and like, uh-huh, uh-huh. But there's nothing that they're really grasping. There's no real connection there.
God, that's an important observation. There's no connection.
Mhm.
And it's funny. I finally reached a point in my career where I was confident enough when I was talking with a client or a prospect and they were techno barfing or throwing their jargon at me. And I got confident enough to say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, wait a minute, back up. You just used the phrase. I don't know what that means. What,
Mhm.
what does that mean?" Uh,
Yep.
but it is amazing how often we can get stuck in our own secret language
Yeah.
that the rest of the world doesn't know. They have no reason to know it.
Yeah. Well, the other part of that too, and the example of Tractor Supply, part of that is just about connection, is just being open for feedback, being open for criticism. And I think a lot of us, we miss out on connection. And this is, I'd love to get your take on this. I said it hit me, whatever you say. Like we miss out on connection because we're so worried about our own perception, our own ego, our own
Yeah.
whatever it may be, that we miss out of like, it's really all about you. And if I don't ask this question, if I don't dig deeper, then I'm selling you short. I don't know if you agree with that or any experience you've seen with that, Joe?
Well, yeah, and we were talking beforehand about this leadership assessment that I've
Yeah.
used, where you do just that. You ask for feedback, and it's also, oh my gosh, here's one, Brent. I was working with a company. They had a new CEO
Mhm.
who he had no executive experience, but he was a young guy, young company. They made him the CEO. and he had a group of his like 40 people in the leadership team, and they were talking about whatever, the next thing they were going to do going forward.
Mhm.
And he said, okay, so if everybody's with that, that's what we'll do. Let's go. And then blessedly, they took a break, and I called him over. I said, dude, your two top people were sitting on the front row, and they were like this.
Mm.
They're not buying it. You got to go back. And when you start the meeting again, say, wait a minute, before we make this a hard and fast decision, tell me what we're missing. Tell me what, but he wasn't reading the room. I mean, it was as simple in that case, really, as he wasn't reading the body language.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, feedback is so, when I work with startups, which I do a lot, I'll tell them, I'll say, you've got your plan, you got your product, you know exactly what you're going to do. Put it out in the marketplace and you'll go, wait a minute. The market will give you information.
Yeah.
And you will change course. And that's a good thing. That's fine. But I totally agree with everything you said about feedback and being open.
Yeah, it's just it's always an interesting thing. Like in our business, obviously, just like you're talking about in your open, Joe, the only way we're successful is that we help agencies be successful.
Yep.
That's the only way we win. And one of the challenges, this isn't surprising, is that the best agencies are successful have the leaders that are open to be criticized or coached. And even that, like to go with their team, like a lot of people don't want to hear the reality of, hey, this isn't working.
I used to have a tagline that said, we help great companies get even better. And a guy told me, he said, that's dumb. He said, it's lousy companies that you need to be working with. I said, lousy companies won't hire me.
Right. Yep.
Or anybody like me,
Yeah.
because they don't want to hear it.
Right. 100% true. I don't want to get off on the side about our business right now, but there's in our scope, there's 40,000 approximately independent insurance agencies. The majority of them don't want to hear a thing. And again, I don't have any ill will. It's just a matter of there's a few that say, hey, listen, is there a higher level of this? Are there things that
Yeah,
I'm missing?
is there any way we could do this even better?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Well,
yeah, there always is.
I was at an event last week. I was speaking at Joe, and it's funny brought up because I was out in San Diego and we're talking about performance and all those things, and it reminded me. I was like, "Do you remember?" It hit me like, if you're not a golf fan, I apologize, but I think most people know Tiger Woods. And do you remember when Tiger was like winning all these tournaments, and then he totally restructured his swing?
Yes.
It's like most people would never do that. I'm doing so good. He's like, there's a whole nother level.
I used to ask audiences at the time of years back, I'd say, who's the best golfer in the world? Everybody in the room would say Tiger Woods.
Mhm.
I'd say, let me give you a clue. Tiger Woods has a coach.
Right. It's funny. Well, that's not fair. He has a coach. If you've ever been like at a rec golf tournament, well, that's not fair. You have a coach. It's like, uh-huh.
Yeah, we want to win.
It's like, yeah. So, oh, that's good discussion there. Well, I want to ask you another question, Joe. And you did send out you sent me the assessment and what you do,
Yeah.
and there's such gold in that. And again, you can take this wherever you want. But one of the things I want to ask you, just thinking about working with high level leaders, right? The ones that do want to be coached. What are some of the things that you see high level leaders, right, that they struggle with? Right? What do they do that maybe many other leaders, high level leaders do certain things a certain way. Some leaders struggle with stuff. Where's the gap? What does it look like? What have you learned? I want to tap into your experience here.
Yeah, let me talk about 3 or 4 of those because
Yeah.
I have an assessment and it's called Mistakes Leaders Make and What to Do Instead.
Yeah.
And I mean, everybody can improve on everything. Gosh knows I can. But I picked out just a couple of these that people might not necessarily think of. I mean, we've all got to be good communicators. We've all got to be good at feedback. We've all got to learn to be good at change and that sort of thing. But let me give you one. I'm going to take it straight off the assessment here.
Yeah.
Recognizing and rewarding superstars, but not focusing on consistency. And here's the idea. It's tempting and easy to single out and recognize the superstar. But when you look at consistently successful teams, their strength is in consistency of performance across the board, not occasional superstar performance. I've said forever, consistency of performance is the great brand builder.
Hmm.
Inconsistency of performance is the great brand killer. And I've thought we've all dealt with companies like this, that if there were truth in advertising, they'd hang this over their front door. It would say, feel lucky, come on in. And then underneath it would say, depends on who you get.
Ah,
And so the thing is, we might get an email from a client that says, I work with you guys all the time. I got to tell you that I worked with Susan the other day. I've just got to say, she went above and beyond. She was incredible. And that's a great thing to hear. And Susan needs recognition for that. What's better to hear is, Brent, I work with you guys all the time. And I got to let you know, no matter who I work with in your company, they're always top of the line, first class, professional. They know their stuff. They're a pleasure to deal with. Now that's a hard standard to reach.
yep.
And I'm not saying don't give recognition to superstars, but gosh, I had a person in a conference one time say, there's a grocery store that I love. And if you go in, you'll see 10 carts lined up behind this one register, and one or two or no carts behind all the others, even though there's cashiers there. That's because that one cashier is so great that everybody wants to deal with her. Isn't that great? And I said, no, that's terrible. There shouldn't be one person out of five that people want to deal with. So consistency of performance across the board. Thought, comment?
Oh, yeah, I do. I know you've got more. So this is fun to go through this, but again, I mean, for this audience, oh my goodness. First of all, we always see this. We talk to sales professionals in the insurance
Yep,
industry. It is without a doubt, and this isn't 100%, but it's pretty close. We've got this top third tier that are elite performers. We've got this middle
absolutely.
tier that they may go good or bad. We're not sure yet. And the bottom tier, we don't think they're going to make it or they're new. And it's really interesting, Joe. I had a recent podcast interview with a C-suite leader, and she was talking about how at least one of the companies she was with, rated the leadership performance, and they rated off their worst performer. And it kind of caught me. I was like, "Whoa!" She goes, "Think about how that changes you as a leader."
Yep.
Whereas most people go, well, these two or three or whatever it is,
Yeah.
they'll help propel us and me to the top or where we need to be or be good enough to make numbers or goals or whatever. So that whole philosophy, I mean, consistency of performance is amazing. And the other thing too, and if you don't mind, just a really quick plug on how we look at things. And some of this came
Sure.
about because of COVID, but I've talked about this on our podcast. We would often have, Joe, in our business model, a producer or two come to one of our trainings, and they would
Yeah.
get great value out of it. There's no doubt. But I always say, well, how do they relay that to the rest of the team? And what are the other producers doing? And right, all that things that comes into it is, yeah, it's good to up level a couple performers. And yeah, I think you need to encourage and stroke those that are doing great and give them the attaboys and all that. But wow, consistency. So much gold of what you said there. And I got to give one more example. It just hit me because it reminded me. On the Wayback Machine, I was with an organization, insurance agency years ago, and names will remain nameless. There's no names here, but I'll never forget. It was lunchtime, and so the majority of the office team were on lunch or whatever, and I was hanging around doing something. I was walking to the office, and somebody had called in, and the lady who answered the phone was typically more in the accounting department, right, doing the money stuff, and is certainly not a people person. And literally was like, "Yeah, what do you want? Yeah, we'll get back to you when we can. We're at lunch now." Like, this is what I heard. And I'm like, that is the impression that someone just got for our entire organization.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if there's a question there, but just it really struck home when you said of how much inconsistency do we have and what impact does that actually have?
that's the thing. A lot of times companies, for whatever reason, I guess maybe, let me just take website.
Hmm.
They never go to their own website
Yeah.
because, and it's funny, I could go on around about this because I was dealing with this yesterday. Uh, I would love to buy a big purchase item from a company. I can't figure out how to buy it. And they say to do this, go here on our website. And I go there and it's like,
Yeah.
I can't figure it out. I would love to get the CEO of this giant company, sit down beside him and say, you figure it out.
Hmm.
Here's your website.
Hmm.
How would you buy this product on this website? I bet you $100 you can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's so many touch points that the consistency applies to all of them,
Hmm.
all of those touch points.
Yeah. So
Um,
what else you got on your list? Because you've got a
yeah, you
number
want to
of
do another
things
one?
here.
Being out of touch.
Mm.
The tricky thing about being out of touch is that if you are out of touch, you don't know it. You think morale is good. It's not. You think the rollout of the new dealer communication system is going well. It's not.
Mm.
The cure is to, and we touched on this earlier, is to invite and even demand that people tell you the truth, that the truth filters up to you. I was sitting in a meeting of a company, 300 people, all of them in management leadership positions. The CEO got up, and in this example I just gave, I talked about the new communication, dealer communication system. And I was thinking about this example when I wrote that. He got up on stage and he was talking about different things. He said, and let me take a second to talk about the rollout of the new communication system with all our dealers. Couldn't be more pleased, thrilled. You all did a great job. I mean, let me give you some applause for that. I'm sitting on the back row. I'm going to go up on stage later. I'm sitting on the back row with a bunch of people in the company. And the guy next to me, Brent, when the CEO said that, he goes, oh, and he literally put his head on the table and
Oh.
he leaned up and he said, he's so clueless.
Mm.
He doesn't have the first idea. Now, that's an extreme example,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's real easy to think, yeah, everything's okay. Everything's running just fine. Find out. Hey,
Hmm.
it's so easy to assume that with your customers.
Hmm.
No, they're happy. I worked for a major airline that hired a company to do a 1 year survey,
Hmm.
customer survey. And the main result was, and I'll never forget, the CEO announced this in a meeting to all of the senior leadership. He said to me, here's the number one thing the survey told us. Our best customers hate our guts. They were best customers because they lived in hub cities where that airline was darn near the only choice.
Yeah.
And they thought, yeah, we got some great customers. They come all the time. They have to. He said they can't stand us, but
Mm.
they didn't know that until they were open to finding out. So being out of touch,
Can I make a quick comment on that, Joe?
please
I'm going to
do.
hit another one. Just maybe expand upon it. I mean, there's so many different areas when I hear out of touch that come to my mind. And if these relate, let me know. But one of the things we'll often see too with leaders and leadership teams is not only out of touch with themselves and their team, but out of touch with their other leaders. And it hits me because we'll do an assessment. I know you've got an assessment here that you're going through with some of the leaders, and I'll ask a question. And one of the leaders said, I think we're probably a 4 or 5 in this area.
Yeah,
And the other leader's like, oh, I thought we were an 8, 9.
yeah,
And there's a complete disconnect even between leaders on that. Is that something you see as well, or has been part of your
yeah.
experience?
And I love doing that kind of feedback survey
Mhm.
because you do. You will have people saying 8 or 9 and somebody else going, I gave us a 3.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Stir that pot up
Yes.
and see what's going on with those perceptions because there could be something really juicy in there. that you need to be working on. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of that kind of communication.
Yeah, and there's many times too where it's like it does stir up that conversation. It's like this is something we should talk about 10 years ago. We're finally talking about it,
Yeah,
And so it's that kind of hidden, the hidden idea in there. One more thing I want to hit on this, and I don't know
dude.
if you want to go deeper here, but obviously in terms of your customers, and you mentioned that, right? And oh, they love us. No, it's just the hub cities. When I talk to either sales professionals, the producers we work with, or yesterday, in fact, I was on with the service team group. And one of the things that we talked about, it was really about referrals, but it's interesting. It's like, well, why don't we get more? Well, we don't ask. Well, why don't we ask? Well, somewhere deep in our soul, we don't know if we've really earned it. So one of the things, and again, this is something we've talked about. There's a book written on it, so I want to give it credit. The Ultimate Question. There's a lot of different variations of it, right? But on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely would you be to refer a friend or associate to a
Yep,
firm? And even that question, as I don't know, I would say it's not a threatening question, but people are nervous to ask that. And it came out, and we finally kind of got to the bottom of it is why are we worried about asking that question? Because, well, what if they give us a 5? And I would say, well, when would you like to know that?
exactly.
And do you see that where there's a hesitation as part of the, and I don't know if this really leads to the out of
I
touch,
do
but
see it. And let me tell you, along with that, Brett, what else I see is that companies will sometimes structure that kind of survey so that it's really easy for the customer to give them a high mark.
yeah,
You need to be going the opposite direction.
right.
You need to say, no, tell us where we could be better. And there's ways of phrasing that, like instead of saying, tell us what we're doing wrong,
Mhm.
a lot of people don't want to say, well, here's where you're wrong. So tell us what we could be doing better. We
Mhm.
know we could be better, but sometimes we can't see it. So tell us. I did years of work with Enterprise Rental Car, and they had one survey question that drove everything. How likely would you be to refer us to a friend, family member, or associate? That was it. They said that's the magic number. Would they tell other people? I wrote a book called Magnetic: The Art of Attracting Business.
Yep.
My whole approach to business was because it's so funny. I've worked with so many salespeople. I personally hate to sell. I don't want to sell anything to anybody. I want the market to come to me.
Mhm.
And so I always figured out, how can I get the market to come to me? How can I do work that is so good that word of mouth is going to refer other business to me?
Yeah.
And I don't, when I say I hated to sell, a lot of people that know me say, no, that's stupid. You're a great salesman. But the way I did it, and actually that kind of gets into the 3 customer rules. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's get into it. I want to hear about it, please.
Yeah, the book. Brent asked me before we did it. He said, in becoming a category 1, you've got a chapter called the 3 rules.
Right.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
The 3 rules are: know the customer better than anybody else, get closer to the customer than anybody else, emotionally connect with the customer better than anybody else. And let me kind of wrap those together, starting with knowing the customer better than anybody else. I would, in my business, very often, there would be 4 or 5 of us up for a job. And the prospect would very often interview each of us separately in the day, a conference call, now a Zoom call. There'd be a committee, or maybe it would be one-on-one. But anytime, and I did, this is forever. This is the only answer I ever gave, Brent. If somebody said, so Joe, great talking to you today. Okay, why should we do business with you? My answer every single time was, I don't know that you should. That's what we need to find out.
Mhm.
Right there, whoop, the whole dynamic was shifted.
Mm.
It wasn't, I'm going to try to talk you into something. It's, no, we're not on opposite sides. We're on the same side. Let's find out.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not the right fit, believe me, I will tell you in a heartbeat. And so I would ask them questions. And I would also say, and this is about getting to know the customer than anybody else. If I was on a call like that, I would very often say, well, at some point, I would always say, let me tell you what I know about your business, your company, the industry. What I do know is this is going on in an industry, that's going on in an industry. I know you got a new CEO, and he's the first CEO that has not come from sales, he's come from engineering.
Hmm.
And that's put a kind of a different spin on the leadership view of things. And on and on and on, to the point that they're just going, how does he know so much about us? Because it's my job. I have to know that to know if we're the right fit. Let me tell you a step further that I would go. And this is where you get closer literally as well as, figuratively. There would be many times when I'd be talking with a prospective client and I'd say, listen, Southwest has got nonstop flights to Denver from Nashville. Let me hop on a plane, pick a day, if you would like to do this. Let me come out and spend 2 or 3 hours on my dime. I'll pay for it with you and whoever else you think it would be useful for me to talk to and for them to talk to me. And again, let's find out if we got the right fit here. I'll never forget, there's a company in Columbia, South Carolina, Brett. I flew down there and the CEO was waiting for me. It was kind of a mid-sized company. He was waiting for me outside security and we said, hello, how you doing? Glad you're here, da, da, da. And as we walked to the car, he said, you've pretty much got the job, don't you? And I said, well, that's nice to hear. He said, we've never had anybody
Wow.
do this.
Mhm.
We've never had anybody show this much interest in getting it right with us.
Mm.
Boom. See,
Mm.
I didn't consider that selling.
Mm-mm.
I considered that finding the right fit.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
the other thing, obviously, once you've got a customer, it's so easy to your customers, everybody watching, listening to this right now, their customers change
Yep.
all the time. As an insurance buyer,
Mhm.
I change, my life changes, my business changes, my family changes.
Yep.
And so that customer you talked to a while back doesn't exist anymore. They're now even a slightly, sometimes a significantly different entity. And so we have to maintain that. I know with you guys, to brag on you guys a little bit, my understanding and in my contact with you guys is that that's something you do very well.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, we
and
sure work on it. Yeah.
it's really powerful.
Yeah, I want I want to hit on a couple things here. First
Yeah.
of all, the no more, man, the let me tell you what I know. I love that line. I hope listeners are writing that down because we teach and preach, and again, part of the things that we do so much. In fact, one of our I don't know if it's a title of a section we do, I guess that's what you call it, is called the ultimate competitive advantage. And the ultimate competitive advantage is preparation, which is really what you're talking about, right? You've done your work, you've done your homework.
I've always said, I want you to pick back up, but I've always said if I could have one competitive advantage, one, assuming that price and product and all that is, you know,
Yep.
everybody's kind of in the same ballpark. If I could have one thing to set me apart, it would be that exact thing. The way I said it was, let me know the customer better than anybody else.
Yeah.
I'll win almost every time.
Yeah. I just did it was a section this week, so it's very relevant that I did with a group about 70 some salespeople. And I said, like some of you got more experience, some of you got more resources, some of you got different tools, all these things, but there's one thing that you all can control, and that is your level of preparation. And when you
Yeah.
walk into that meeting, and again, it just shows. And just to be able, and again, there's so many ways you can phrase it, but in preparation for this meeting, let me ask you a few questions. And I love it. All of a sudden it hit me. It's like, let me tell you what I know. And it's like, wow, this this is different. This person really showed up to play. They really know me. Um,
Even the little stuff, the just human stuff that
mhm.
everybody on this with us knows this sort of thing. I'll never forget. I walked into a CEO's office one Monday morning. He said, "How you doing?" I said, "Go Buckeyes." He lit up. I knew. I
I bet.
knew. because he was an avid, he was a Ohio State graduate,
Yep.
and just it lit him up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those things. Well, and maybe that gets, and you kind of already hit on. I don't know if there's more to add or you want to add, but that last one I thought was interesting, and that's an example of what you just shared, to emotionally connect. And we talk about this. I mean, this is kind of sales 101 and even part of leadership, so that people buy emotionally, they justify intellectually. I think that's true in communication.
Yes.
Yeah. So how do you see businesses, leaders, sales, whatever it is, how do you see them best connect emotionally? What are some examples or just ways of thinking about that, maybe?
Well, I do know that the first presentation by any kind of speaker, consultant was when I was in real estate. It was in the late 70s in the ballroom of the Olympic Hotel in Seattle, Washington.
Mm.
A guy named Tom Hopkins, who was a legendary real estate speaker trainer. He said the two main things you got to do, they got to like you, they got to trust you.
Mm.
And that was decades ago. I
Yep.
still remember that.
Yep.
I think the biggest part of that, and this is so hard to do, and everybody knows this, while they're talking, please stop thinking about the next thing you're going to say. Really listen, because if you really listen, you'll hear things that'll make you go, whoa, wait a minute. Yes, I had that same experience, and I've run up against that myself. Boom, 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 boom. That's a connection.
Mm.
And you just build those connections. CEO of the Deluxe Financial called me in his office one day, and we were talking for 2 hours. And all of a sudden he stopped. He said, do you know why you're in my office and your competitors aren't? I said, why? Chuck Phelps. I said, why, Chuck? He said, because you get us. He said, now everybody else knows what they do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what we do.
Mm.
You know where we're trying to go, and you're helping us advance that strategy. And so and again, this is stuff we all know, but being really intentional about it,
Yeah.
keeping it top of mind
Oh,
is a big
yeah.
deal.
It's a huge deal, and it is work, and there's a skill to it, and I mean, all of that comes with it. And I can be very transparent, as I do these podcast interviews, that's been a huge challenge for me, and it's skill, and I'm working on it. Is okay, what's the next question? Wait a second. Just listen to what they're saying, and there's a
Yeah,
question there,
yeah.
and let it happen. And it's just better conversation. It's real conversation. There's more emotional connection there. And I had something written down that I was going to say because I know I was going to say you're talking about leadership, and I think of leadership in sales and emotional connections on things. Um, there's so many examples in so many ways, but I think about starting like with salespeople, and how often again we want to talk about our stuff. And there was a one of our top performers that we had the pleasure of working with. He's got a huge book of business, very successful. And talking about keeping things simple. I said, of all the things, like what is it about? And he goes, I have one mindset or general mindset in every conversation. He goes, first of all, I'm not an insurance agent or a producer. I'm a business consultant. And my only thing I ask myself is, how can I help this business move forward?
Boom.
And that is the foundational part of every question I ask and how I approach things. And guess what? It works pretty well. And I think about this with leaders, and tell me if this relates as well. But same thing with your team. How can I help this person move forward?
Yeah. So what do we got? Another couple of hours? Because I could really talk about.
We can. I got my only hard cutoff is another 15 minutes, and I want to respect your time. But I love this. I could sit and talk forever.
Yeah, the thing I've got a good friend who's a consultant and speaker, and she talks about the important in knowing the people that you work with,
Mhm.
your leadership team, and beyond, all through knowing their story.
Ooh.
Uh, I had there was a bank I was working with, small bank, 150 employees, and they were going to undergo a big change. And the CEO, after I did a bunch of sessions with leadership, he said, Joe, what can I do to make this whole thing work maximum? I said, you ready? Do you mean that? He said, I mean it. I said, have coffee or breakfast or lunch with all 150 employees, one at a time, over the next, however many days that would take.
Yep.
I mean, devote your breakfast, a coffee break, and lunch, and another coffee break in the afternoon to talking one-on-one with employees about the changes and why you're excited about them, but more important, what's going on with them.
Mm.
And he said, that's a lot. And I
Yeah.
said, yeah, it is. Randy did it. And he said it was life-changing for everybody involved, and certainly for the business. He said it was just an incredible experience. It changed everything.
Yeah. As you said that, this is a conversation I had a while back, and it's easy to be on the outside. I always say it's easy to be a coach or consultant because you can see it and go, oh, we'll just do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just we have blind spots, and you're in the midst of your day and your week, and you just don't see it. But I was having a fairly casual conversation with an agency leader, and we were just talking about different stuff and the challenges and problems he was facing and whatever. And I said, hey, share with me like just what a day looks like. And it was funny because he was just kind of going through, I get here about this time. And then I head up the stair. I walk through our lobby, and then I head up to the stairs, and then I go through, whatever it is, a corridor or whatever. And then I get to my office and start usually whacking away at emails and different things and returning phone calls. And I said, oh, it's interesting. So they're like, you have your team, are they there? Well, it depends when I come in, but yeah, usually I've got team members around. I said, most important thing you can do every day is acknowledge those people. And he's like, oh, and again, he was a great guy. He just goes, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. Of course, I love my people, and I'm going to share my favorite quotes, Joe, and I'd love to get your perception of this. And I don't even know, I should give quote where it's due, but I think it's several people have said different aspects of it. But here's the quote: silent gratitude is no gratitude at all.
In my book, Be the Best at What Matters Most, one chapter is about Marty Grunder and his upscale landscaping company in Dayton, Ohio.
Yeah.
Marty handwrites thank you notes and mails it to the employee's home,
Wow.
where the employee will open it and his wife or her husband and the kids are there. And they could say, wow, look what Marty wrote me.
That's just, all these things we could probably could go on forever, but it just hits me because again, I'm thinking to myself of how many times, like, why do I do that? Or why, we have these, and
Yeah.
it hit me. It's like, it doesn't take a lot more. It just takes more.
Yeah.
In so many ways. So, all right, here's what I want to do. And if you're open to
Yeah.
this, first of all, I would love to have you back on at some point. Maybe we can take a topic or two, whatever
Love
you want
to.
to do. It'd be fun. I
Anytime.
think there's such value in this conversation. But I always want to, and I want to be cognizant of your time and respect your time, Joe. But my last question I want to ask is really about you, but in how it relates to what you've learned in your experience. And that's a question I ask for all guests. So just imagine today. I know this is a kind of a weird hypothetical make-believe story, but today, let's say we get done with this interview, you walk out of your office there or whatever, and all of a sudden you bump in to the younger version of you. And I don't know how many years you want to go back, 20, 30, 40 years. It doesn't matter, right? Kind of the younger version of you. And that younger version of you looks up and says, oh, wise, all-knowing, experienced Joe.
No, he would say, what the hell happened to us?
What's going on? That's how I feel about myself. So anyway, he looks at you and goes, hey, I've only got 30 seconds. If you give me one piece of advice that I should know right now, what would it be?
My great nephew asked me that exact question. He's about 24 years old at a wedding last week. And I'll tell you what I told him, and it's exactly what I would tell me. I'd say, bud, it's all relationships. One word, 2 words. I got a follow-up word. It's all about relationships. The quality and success of your life, of your business, more important, of your family, all of it. It's all about relationships. And the word that drives me, and I aspire to it, it's an aspirational goal for me. One word, kindness. It's all about relationships. And I want to try and be about kindness in everything I do. including my business.
Sure.
So there you go. One
Uh,
2-word answer.
I think that's yeah, you kept it simple, but that's what matters. I mean, because I remember that, and again, you ask anybody, and I don't want to go too much into this because that's just a great answer. But in business, is this business still about relationships? Yeah, 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 yeah. And then it just comes back, and I ask myself this question, like, what deposits am I making daily into these relationships?
Yeah.
And have I taken it for granted? And one thing I think all of us is different ages, but we're all aging. We're all getting older, regardless of where we're at. I know for me right now, and as I watch my kids grow up, I've got one in college. She's going to be married. I've got another senior in high school, and I'm aware now how fast things go. It's so true, Joe, as you say that. Like all these things and money and trivial things, like yeah, it's fun, but like to have my daughter say, Dad, I just love and appreciate you. To have a client say, it's great to know you and the impact you've had. Like
Yeah.
that's it. That's it. So, listen, as we wrap up here, a couple of things. What I know you mentioned a little bit what you're doing now. I know you're not doing as much consulting things, and you've got a few different things and working with startups. What are you doing? And if someone want to reach out to you or go buy your books or whatever they are, because they're
What?
great. How
Yeah,
can they?
they can buy my books, and I encourage you to buy the whole library because I've still got a daughter in college. Uh, we got a late start,
Well,
but
my youngest is 7, Joe. So
I encourage you to buy the whole Callaway library.
yes, please
Yeah, but
do.
you can get them on Amazon. You can just go
Yeah.
or put my name in on Amazon under books, and it'll show you um, a bunch of them. And what I'm doing now, as I mentioned briefly, I am actively investing and participating in a number of businesses and projects, um, real estate stuff, some startups. Um, as I mentioned to you, one interesting one is I'm now with a group of other guys in the wholesale bourbon business. We buy every quarter, we buy 5,000 barrels of new Kentucky bourbon and we store them and then we resell them. And a few of us are doing the same thing with an Irish distiller.
Mm,
So,
that's so fun.
yeah,
That's
it's
great.
interesting stuff.
100%. Well, again, thanks again. Any final words you want to say to the audience, Joe, before we officially say goodbye?
Just, I saw a guy wearing a cap yesterday and it said, no bad days. So I thought, yeah, there can be tough times,
Mhm.
but you don't make it a bad day.
Mm.
Make it a good day. Listen, I appreciate the time everybody took to join us on this. So I hope you got at least one or two good ideas out of it.
Well, I know selfishly, I got many. I got lots of notes. So thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. Again, Joe Calloway, go check out his books. Go buy some bourbon. I don't know.
Oh,
Go.
please, the bourbon drinking market is way down right now.
Okay. All right.
Go buy bourbon.
Yeah, I have to mention it's funny just why I got you on here. I was interviewed in a podcast. They're actually one of our clients. They got some young people do a podcast and their insurance. It's called Whiskey and Risk. So maybe I'll do a bourbon and Brent or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
That's perfect. Let's do it.
Hey, thank you, Joe, so much. We appreciate you. And for all the listeners, go wish you well. Go make it your best version possible. Take care, everybody.